UCLA lost someone to the transfer portal. Where'd he go? And can Amari Bailey and Jaime Jaquez Jr. climb in the NBA draft combine? Let's talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, your host, D1 play-by-play broadcaster, and diehard UCLA fan. Man, it's been quite some time since we relaunched this bad boy in August. So thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. Become an everyday listener of the podcast. We talk basketball, we talk little football, talk just about everything here on Locked On UCLA. Hit that subscribe button and, just follow. It's free wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. As we're going to talk about basketball again today, they're in the midst of the NBA draft combine out in Chicago. UCLA basketball news, players who are not there anymore. And hey, football, what's their biggest game of the season that can make or break their season? And no, it's not the USC game, even though it's important. Here we go. Let's talk Locked On UCLA. So kind of going into the NBA draft combine between Jaime Jaquez Jr. and the likes of Tiger Campbell and everything in between, you've got UCLA where Jaquez, he can jump to maybe a first rounder. There's been different articles between the fact that, hey, he could be a second rounder. I read an article about the Thunder saying, hey, he might be a good second round pick between a Thunder website on Sports Illustrated. But then reading Saturday Out West, another website, had Jaime Jaquez Jr. potentially being taken as early as the late first round, which could be a big impact, saying he might go with the Clippers and stay in Southern California and be in LA, which would be a great fit, I think, for him in terms of just location-wise. Jonathan Givony, who we'll talk about him later again, Givony wrote an article about Jaime Jaquez Jr. that with Jaquez, he'd be well acquainted in a front seat in terms of being local, being a local kid, and might be a guy that could fit in well with the Clippers, considering he had a 39-inch vertical leap that was really a lot more explosive than most of people thought at the combine. 39-inch vertical leap. He's the Pac-12 Player of the Year, and he could easily rise from the Pac-12 combine. And yes, I know we'd have loved to see him in a UCLA uniform for one more year, but people projecting him to make it to the late first round, that would be a big step up for Jaquez. And I think the Clippers would, that would be a good fit for Jaquez with the footwork, with the athleticism that people don't really think he has, even though he's a lot more athletic. He could be one of those sneaky players, thrives in the Clippers where they all like to grind, be, underrated, and all of a sudden, hey, you never know. Speaking of risers, too, Amari Bailey, after yesterday's May 18th scrimmage, he was in the first scrimmage for Amari Bailey, reading a Bleacher Report article talking about how good he was. I was reading an article a couple weeks ago, I believe it was by CBS Sports, correct me if I'm wrong, but it said Amari Bailey had fallen his stock. Mind you, at the early part of May, people have already forgotten what Amari Bailey had done in March, considering he was 17 points per game after Jalen Clark got injured, hit the big shot UCLA needed if they were going to beat Gonzaga, and everything had been going pretty good. And then all of a sudden his draft stock slowly fell. But yet now in Bleacher Report, they have him a top 35, close to 40 pick. And in that first 5-on-5 scrimmage, it was Amari Bailey who had great ball handling display. If you go on Twitter, you'll say, oh, look at Amari Bailey's handles, showing how, hey, he can score with the basketball, 19 points, 6 of 9 from the floor, 2 rebounds, 6 assists. And in his post-scrimmage interview, he talked about, hey, I really enjoy getting others open in terms of playmaking, distributing, and hey, that 6 for 9 shooting, that's exactly what we saw at the end of the year for Amari Bailey. Jonathan Wasserman from Bleacher Report saying Amari Bailey, hey, he was the 31st best prospect on the 2023 pre-combine big board, saying he has to stand out among the pack during combine scrimmages to crack the first round boards. Because there's times where Bailey was near the back end of those players for UCLA who might be drafted, whether even included Jalen Clark, it included all these other players. I know Tiger Campbell is listed as the G League in the G League Combine. But for Amari Bailey, he's talked about, hey, his mentality coming in. Heck, it's in Chicago. You didn't think Amari Bailey was going to dominate at the Combine that was in Chicago, where he's from. That's important for him. So Bailey growing initially viewed as a second-round pick, more NBA players and more NBA media, NBA scouts viewing Amari Bailey climbing up. We have Jaquez, who's gone from a second-rounder or a mid-second rounder, and all of a sudden just jumped up to an end of late first-rounder. Amari Bailey, that second-round pick, I know, would he really have left UCLA to be a second-round pick? That's a different debate for another time. But the more he climbs, the more he builds on these combine scrimmages. It might be interesting to see if Amari Bailey can become a first-rounder. Not entirely sure if that's the case, but Jaquez has climbed to potentially be a late first-rounder, and Amari Bailey, after the May 18th scrimmage, just looking at Brett Siegel, NBA, Amari Bailey's been fantastic. Just reading all these tweets, reading all these different things, he has been a standout on the court. Jaquez's intangibles is what makes him as a sneaky standout to get drafted in the late first round or be a steal at the early part of the second round. And depending how late Bailey falls, going back to Amari Bailey, he could be one of those guys that is a steal at the end of the second round or the middle of the second round for someone who wants to see him develop. He could be a great player and a great fit for a program just like that. And then, hey, has someone left UCLA? We'll talk about that more and UCLA football after I tell you again, guys. I have to tell you about Birddogs because Birddogs, my goodness, they are the most comfortable shorts in the world. I'm not kidding you. I had them on yesterday. I'm just walking around, and the amount of times I just found myself running and zooming around the house and just being goofy and rocking around. I mean, that's my normal personality, but hey, you look better and you feel great wearing Birddogs. Half the time I got shorts, they're, all right, mediocre. They're stretchy fabric. The legs look great. They're extremely comfy. I can't emphasize how comfy they are. They are the best shorts I've ever put on. Yes, you just throw them on, you put them on, and you can go to the golf course. You can go on a date with them. You can go to a meeting, hang out with friends. It fits every single thing with Birddogs. I promise you, they're extremely comfortable. Firsthand, I got a couple of pairs from Birddogs, and let me say, first, they're super funny, and second, those shorts are absolutely fantastic. So go get yourself a pair of Birddogs at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. When you enter the promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege. You won't regret it. Cruising on into segment 2 of Locked On UCLA. Man, oh man. What are we going to do here? UCLA finally had a guy transfer out. I talked about all these different things in terms of, UCLA hasn't lost anybody to the transfer portal. I talked about that in the previous weeks of this podcast, only to see a late couple of entrants into the portal right before it closed. Matt Etienne, not really sure what the status is on him, but if you saw the breaking news in the recent days, Abramo Zanka, who only averaged about 5 minutes per game with UCLA, limited playing time, maybe was a potential for a breakout candidate this year, found himself deciding, hey, I'm going to go play elsewhere. Not sure if that was more of a coaching, tell him to get in the portal, if that was a personal decision, seeing, hey, I can go get playing time elsewhere other than in Westwood. So Zonka ends up going to Wake Forest. So he goes through the Pac-12 / Big Ten for UCLA. Goes from the Pac-12 into ACC play with Wake Forest, who was a winning basketball team last year. I believe they're 19-14, and he got that final scholarship spot reported by Jonathan Givony again. And what Zonka had to talk about was that the fact that Wake Forest, beautiful campus, so green, the academics is important to him. And while it is sad to see, one of Ivo Simovich's first international recruits leave, I just wondered how that'll be a factor moving forward. But he talked about, hey, this is a spot that's got one of the best facilities in the nation. They've actually tried to recruit him before, did Wake Forest. And instead, he said, all right, I'm going to go to UCLA, play 22 games, 5.4 minutes per game, made half of his threes, made each of his 4 free throws, and kind of reading what the scouts say on him or what some things have been written about him. Sample size is small, but there's good things to hope for Abramo Zonka. So we hope that, he was going to get some love and get some playing time somewhere else. And Zonka had said, hey, over the last couple of weeks, he's been getting reached out by many schools. Of course, some kids today like to overblow, so I kind of say, all right, let's just exaggerate how much love I'm getting. But got to think, Zonka's got that good basketball body, which is what I've been reading. And, he's a guy that can grow into a nice college basketball game and maybe into the future as a pro, whether it be, somewhere overseas, or if he blossoms at Wake Forest and eventually turns into a standout NBA prospect. He's still at UCLA. So if you're at Westwood and you're like, I still see Zonka on campus at Westwood, it's because UCLA is a quarter system and they don't finish until early to mid-June. So you might still see Zonka around SoCal and LA. Yet for the guy who played in a couple different leagues in Italy, remember, he's 21, 22 already. He's already an older prospect at the Euro U20s. He was a 9-point-per-game guy. It just shows you, while the international recruiting will be an important aspect for UCLA, grabbing the correct players. Remember, they almost had the Turkish big man who couldn't get into school. You've got Zonka, who was there for a year, didn't play. Now he's transferred out, although he's a little older. He's not 18, 19 like Ilan Fibleul. And then you got Ade Amara, who is seemingly on the verge of joining UCLA. The one thing is, while you have the glitz and the glamour of Westwood, Hollywood, UCLA, all in the backgrounds, for the Bruins, you sit here and you wonder, how much can the international recruiting help us, but also hurt us? Because you can go get the top prospects across the country, go get the 5 stars, but they're unhappy if they're not as good. They can go to the NBA after a year. They can go hit the portal. So there's similar risks to going after international players. And so far, if you think about it, the Bruins are a half 0-for-2, right? Not getting one player in Zonka leaving, but they've kind of opened that door to going across the country to get these international recruits, which is fun. And reading from the Bruin Report Online, the recruiting has shifted in 2024 to getting more international players. And I'm not sure how and why necessarily. You don't need a full roster of one thing or a full roster of another thing. You can kind of gel based on what talent is available on a given year, but we can just see what the Abramo Zonka case will mean going forward. Is that going to turn off international recruits? Is it as simple, he didn't develop as we wanted him to? Those are all questions UCLA has to figure out. Make sure they can get these guys on campus, because I believe it's Ejie, I probably butchered that name, the Turkish big man, who couldn't get on campus as a late ad for UCLA when he would have joined in the most recent season. So how these all play out? We just hope that the Zonka transfer, the lack of getting a player in, doesn't affect them moving forward, as they want to solidify that commitment and the signing of Ade Amara, who is a tantalizing 7'3" big man from Spain. And we hope that he is amongst the players that comes and joins the Bruins. And with maybe a Dembona, Jalen Clark, you got Ilan Fibleul. You could have a nice fearsome foursome there when everybody's healthy, with, of course, Stefanovic. And speaking of international players, but coming from Utah, of course, you've got all sorts of guys coming in to develop talent in a year that'll be unlike many years we'll see with UCLA basketball. So we hope the international recruiting doesn't get hurt by Zonka, which we knew transferring out would be something, but he finds himself in Wake Forest, lands on his feet, and we hope he does well there for a winning basketball program and get some time at a beautiful campus with the Demon Deacons. Cruising on here in Locked On UCLA, the Bruins football team, hey, we've talked about that a little bit. Hey, are they going to reach that 9-win mark this year? Will they be 9-3? Will they be 8-4, 7-5? Will they go to a bowl game again under Chip Kelly? A lot of unknowns leaning forward into UCLA's season, considering we don't know who is starting at what position. But what got me wondering, what stretch of games do I think will be the games that actually make a difference? And let's revisit this UCLA 2023 football schedule, why don't we? We've talked about this before, but I figured, hey, why not talk about it again in mid to late May? You've got UCLA starting the season against Coastal Carolina. They've got Grayson McCall. That'll be a tough game, a lot tougher than I think UCLA fans will give them credit for, despite it being the first game for Danton Lynn and a lot of hopefully improved defenders and defensive schematics. I think it won't be a good showing for the UCLA defense if McCall and the Chanticleers come out and play some good offense that day. Then you've got San Diego State on the road at Snapdragon Stadium. That'll be a rocking environment. One would assume probably a toasty September day, maybe not so much in San Diego. Yet I think those will be interesting matchups. NC Central. Then you've got Utah for the Pac-12 opener on the road, and then a bye heading into the two crucial games of the season. Washington State at home October 7th, and then immediately next week at Oregon State. The back half of the schedule, I think, is somewhat light when you go after Oregon State. You've got Stanford on the road, Colorado at home, at Arizona, and then you host Arizona State before you get to play SC and Cal. So you've got a stretch there after the Oregon State-Stanford games where if you can pick off both those games, you can maybe go on a stretch where you win some games. And I'm not sure Stanford will be competing right away under Troy Taylor, and the jury is still out for Deion Sanders. Arizona State. Speaking of new coaches, Arizona State. You have a stretch after you play Oregon State where 3 of your 4 games are against teams with new head coaches, and 2 of those games are at home. And Arizona is a team that beat you last year, so you want to get some revenge for the previous year. Probably depends how many guys can remember based on all the old veterans being shuffled out. But Chip Kelly and the staff will want to beat Zona out in Tucson in early November. I'm circling October 14th. That is a truly season-defining game. Right smack dab in the middle of the season, Oregon State is the 6th game on UCLA's schedule. That's the turning point in my mind of the season. Of course, DJ Uiagalelei, you had Oregon State, who beat Oregon, knocked them out of the Pac-12 title game potentially, or they did at the end of the year with that loss or with that win in a crazy comeback. They had no quarterback play basically last year. They had defense that would run the ball. The Beavers, with the revamped Research Stadium, will be rocking with a team that expects to be very, very good. So the thing for UCLA is how do they handle playing a tough Wazoo team at home right before Oregon State while they have the bye in between Utah and then the Washington State game. Playing the Beavers is a game where it's in the middle of the season. Remember last year, UCLA 5-0, whatever it was, and then you played Oregon, and then you're like, oh man, this is the big game. Again, they place an Oregon school in the middle of the season, and while it might be a little bit tougher this year to go 5-0 than it was, in recent years, going 5-0 at Utah to start, Washington State at home, those are tough games, tough asks to do. That Oregon State game is one where even if you're coming off a win against Washington State or back-to-back losses in Pac-12 play against Utah, Wazoo, if you're 0-2 to start, winning that Oregon State game is crucial to, one, technically remaining in a race for any Pac-12 title berth, if that's to be the case, considering the Pac-12 just cannibalizes itself every year. Even with 2 losses, you could still make the Pac-12 title game and make it, as we saw Utah did last year, with the crazy run to the end to win the Pac-12 title. And then with what they have in the back half, their toughest game remaining is USC during the week before, I should say, of Thanksgiving. So in the end, UCLA has a schedule towards the back half. They can run through the competition, get on a second half roll as they've got an early game against the Beavers. So that is the game I am circling. Of course, the SC game will be all important. You've got Utah to start, some interesting non-Power 5 teams early on in the schedule. But Oregon State is the game that can make or break the schedule. It's the game that'll get them on fire or will knock them down a peg when we thought they were clicking at all cylinders early like they were in 2022. And now they find themselves moving forward and growing with the program, which we don't know if it's a young quarterback, if it's a veteran, if it's the transfer, whatever it is. All these guys had to come together, and we hope it's a good season. It might be interesting. I'm betting close to that over-under of 8.5 wins, but UCLA, that Oregon State game will, one, determine if they reach the over in their win total posted by FanDuel, and 2, how successful their season can be if they have to turn it around or if they go on a run against, remember, back half of the schedule, 3 or 4 teams with new coaches right after that Oregon State game. That's mouth-watering stuff right there for UCLA football fans, and we hope we're excited in 2023. In the meantime, that's going to do it for Locked On UCLA. Coming around the weekend, we will talk more about NBA draft combine stuff. We'll talk about UCLA basketball. We're expecting some news from a Jalen Clark, a Dembona, a Damara in terms of, hey, they're either going to commit to UCLA, they're either coming back one way or the other, depending on the player, or they are not. And then next, hey, UCLA softball, NCAA tournament time. Go check them out. They are hosting the tournament at home at Easton Stadium. And then they've got more coverage. UCLA baseball, key series against ASU. Got everything and more here in Locked On UCLA. We'll talk about that in UCLA football. Hey, there's always ways to talk about the Bruins and Chip Kelly. Hands up, Bruins fans. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.